United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting this Monday regarding the conflict in Ukraine and the decisions taken by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. In Brazil, the death toll resulting from heavy rains and landslides in Petropolis rose to 181. In Palestine, Israeli military arbitrarily arrest 40 citizens in the West Bank region. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Monday, the United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting addressing Ukraine conflict and the decisions taken by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. At the emergency summit, nations' representatives explained that it is necessary to find a peaceful solution without the violation of the international law. Countries see as really worrying and delicate the conflict and advocated for a diplomatic and pacific solution. Vasily Nebenzia, the permanent representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations, said that allowing a new bloodshed in the Donbass is something we do not intend to do. Also, Russia's ambassador told the Security Council it remains open to diplomacy and insisted Ukraine is still bound by the Minsk agreement.
The internationally recognized borders of Ukraine have been and will remain unchangeable, regardless of any statements and actions by the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, the permanent representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, said Moscow remained open to diplomacy, but will defend Donetsk and Luhansk from a new Ukrainian military action.
We remain open to diplomacy for a diplomatic solution. However, allowing a new bloodbath in the Donbass is something we do not intend to do.
Meanwhile, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, considered as nonsense that Russia called peacekeepers the troops that will intervene in the eastern Ukraine.
Since announced that he will place Russian troops in these regions. He calls them peacekeepers. This is nonsense. We know what they really are.
On the other hand, China called to address the situation's complexity and urged all parties to resolve the matters by peaceful means.
The current situation in Ukraine is a result of many complex factors. China always makes its own position according to the merits of the matter itself. We believe that all countries should solve international disputes by peaceful means, in line with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter.
Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky said that Kiev is considering breaking off diplomatic relations with Russia in response to its recognition of Lugansk and Donetsk as independent republics.
I have received a request from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to examine the question of breaking up relations between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. I will examine and work on this issue right after this press conference.
The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said his country has taken steps to halt the process of certifying the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia, as the West started taking punitive measures against Moscow after President Vladimir Putin recognized Lugansk and Donetsk as independent republics. The decision is a significant move for the German government, which had long resisted pulling the plug on the project despite pressure from the United States and some European countries to do so. Washington has for years argued that building another pipeline bringing natural gas from Russia to Germany increases Europe's reliance on Russian energy supplies. And also, South Ossetia's people commended the fraternal peoples of Lugansk and Donetsk, qualifying the recognizing of their independence on the part of Russia as a historic event. Citizens organized a caravan on capital streets of Zhivali, where they waved Russian from Lugansk and Donetsk flags. United States and its European allies rushed to react after Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement of Moscow's recognition of the Donbas territories as independent states free of Kyiv's jurisdiction. From the White House, the government's press secretary James Psaki said on Monday that the U.S. administration is ready to, quote-unquote, immediately respond to this step. After Putin's signing of decrees that recognize the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics as independent states, United States President Joe Biden issued an executive order banning the U.S. trade with Luhansk and Donetsk. Governments of the European Union promised to respond with sanctions to Russia's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics' independence. The High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy of the European Union, Joseph Borrell, spoke of the Kremlin's decision as a blatant violation of international law, the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and the Minsk agreements, also expressing the bloc's determination to respond with new sanctions against Moscow, despite recent efforts from European leaders and diplomats, such as France and Germany, to ease the conflict, seeking talks with Russia. The Syrian head of state, Bashar al-Assad, said the Moscow will be ready to recognize the People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk. State Duma Deputy Dmitry Stoblin confirmed as he has disclosed having spoken to the Syrian president, who assured him Syria will most likely acknowledge Donetsk and Luhansk as allies and friends after Russia's recognition of independence of the territories from Ukraine, since there is already a precedent with South Ossetia and Abkhazia in the southern area of Greater Damascus in the Caucasus. I beg your pardon. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In the southeastern Brazilian city of Petropolis, the worrying rescue work continues, and in the last few hours, more bodies have been recovered, bringing the death toll from the mudslides and downpour of last week to 181. The heavy rainstorm that devastated part of the city has also left nearly 200 people injured, while the search for these dozens of missing people continues. The storm has left a large-scale trail of destruction since last Tuesday, making it the city's worst weather tragedy ever, according to the latest report from the city's police. In addition to the 181 fatalities, the civil police informs a provisional list accounts for 117 people missing. It is precisely the search for survivors under the rubble that is keeping the rescue teams busy. In the last few hours, the civil defense issued a report confirming 775 incidents were a direct consequence of the landslides. In Guatemala, dozens of indigenous communities gather in the north of Alta Verapaz to reorganize in the struggle against monocropping. Members of the Guatemalan Indigenous Association, Madre Tierra, reiterated that they continue their organized resistance against the expansion of monoculture at the hands of transnational corporations. In a release, the indigenous organization expressed that under no circumstances should the national government and private companies consider large-scale monocropping as a sustainable source of renewable energy. Colombia's population supports the Pacto Histórico coalition during its election campaign. According to polls, Pacto Histórico is the political party preferred by the voters. This organization is aiming to renew the bicameral Congress on the 13th March, as well as the presidential elections to be held on May 29th. So far, people are participating in proselytizing activities in different territories of the nation, led by presidential pre-candidate Gustavo Petro. Among the most important proposals of the historic pact is to achieve free public health care financed by the state, to achieve free quality education, and an employment policy that guarantees decent pay, stability, and social security. This Monday, the full chamber of the Constitutional Court decriminalized the voluntary interruption of pregnancy until 24 gestation weeks in Colombia. In a historic decision, the full chamber of the Constitutional Court decriminalized the voluntary interruption of the pregnancy in up to 24 gestation weeks. The decision has immediate effects and passed with 5-4 votes, with the Deputy Judge Julio Andrés Sosa's attendance studying a claim that was introduced by the Causa Justa movement, made up of various organizations of women, which ask to fully eliminate the crime from penal code. The decision precises that under any circumstance it will be possible to demand a number of weeks when dealing with abortions in 3 legal grounds.
We are very happy about the decision taken by the court today. There is a decision that decriminalizes abortion in Colombia until the 24th week, and from then on, they will continue to govern the causes in the country. This is a historic victory for women in the country, and today we are celebrating it from the Just Cause movement. We are the first country in Latin America to decriminalize abortion and remove it from the penal code. We welcome this historic event because it is a recognition of women's rights.
In Chile, the presidential handover and the power transfer procedures started with just over 2 weeks to go before the president-elect, Gabriel Boric, takes office. The meetings between the delegations for the transfer of presidential powers will extend until March 11th, the date for the swearing-in ceremony for President-elect Gabriel Boric. During this time, the authorities will evaluate the challenges that Boric will face during his term: the migratory crisis in the northern border with Bolivia and the militarization of the south, where there is a territorial conflict between large forestry companies and the Mapuche people, are some of the issues that will be discussed at the meetings. In Cuba, Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla received the Secretary General of the Association of the Caribbean States, ACS, Rodolfo Sabonge, in the framework of his official visit to the Caribbean island. During a meeting in Havana, officials reviewed the current status of the association and exchanged views on the challenges of the wider Caribbean, which suffers the consequences of climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. The Cuban Foreign Minister, Bruno Rodriguez, stressed the importance of the ACS as a mechanism for cooperation in the region and thanked the organization for its historic support in rejecting the economic blockade imposed by the United States. For his part, the Secretary General of the ACS, Rodolfo Sabonge, referred to Cuba's permanent commitment to the regional organization.
It will be a promising year for us to have a summit event of heads of state and governments, and after the very difficult conditions generated by the pandemic of COVID-19, its economic impacts, we think it will be a year of recovery and hope.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In Palestine, Israeli military arbitrarily arrested 40 citizens in the West Bank region. Media reported that on Monday, Zionist troops stormed several West Bank towns, including Al-Karka, Al-Jamun, Deir Abu Mizal, Silwad, and Al-Hizawiya in the Israeli-occupied territories in eastern Jerusalem, where they also attacked Al-Arub and Al-Fawar camps. 10 Palestinian citizens have already been arrested by the Israeli forces on the eve of the attack, using the same tactics. A Syrian army checkpoint stopped a United States military convoy on the eastern outskirts of Al-Hazakah, forcing it to retreat. The convoy, consisting of 4 armored vehicles, accompanied by a vehicle belonging to the militia of Qasd, tried to pass through the village, but it was stopped by the residents. The U.S. military and its allies have been illegally present in northern and eastern Syria for a long time, and in addition to looting the country's oil and grain resources, they are taking action against Syrian residents and forces in the region. On Monday, Mali lawmakers approved a plan allowing the military junta to rule for up to 5 years, despite regional sanctions imposed on the country over delayed elections. 120 members of Mali's 121-seat interim parliament voted to allow the junta to rule for up to 5 years, in line with the earlier junta proposal and without mentioning the date for democratic elections. After staging a coup in the impoverished Sahel state in August 2020, the junta initially announced elections for February 2022, but proposed a rolling extension in December, citing security concerns.
The agenda of this extraordinary meeting focused exclusively on the examination of the draft law on the revision of the transition charter that we have just adopted almost unanimously by the members of the National Transition Council. It is a feeling of joy and pride when the occupying forces leave your territory. You can only rejoice and congratulate the patriotic courage of the authorities, especially the patriotic president, the liberator Assimi Goïta, When the Barkhane forces withdraw, it is the beginning of the end of the war in Mali, and when the occupying forces leave Mali, it is the beginning of the end of the war.
And Spain held an official day of mourning for the victims of the Spanish trawler that sank in stormy waters off Canada and left 9 people dead and 12 missing. Of the 24 who were on board on the Villa de Pizanco 16, there are to be Spanish, and other 8 were identified as Peruvian and Ghanaian nationals. The ship went down off the eastern coast of Canada early on February 15th in what was Spain's worst fishing tragedy in nearly 4 years. A Canadian rescue mission was launched, deploying a rescue ship and helicopter, as well as fishing boats in the region.
Today we have declared national mourning as a result of a terrible shipwreck of the Canadian coast, and first of all we would like to convey our condolences and our solidarity to the families of the victims, their friends of this terrible shipwreck, and also the loss of lives of the ship Villa de Pizanco. Today I plan to travel to Santiago de Compostela to accompany the families in the repatriation of the bodies of the deceased, of the fishermen, and also to receive the 3 survivors of this terrible shipwreck.
Now we move on to other topics. While battling the various outbreaks of COVID-19 active in the country, China is also continuing the vaccination process to achieve a solid immunization barrier against the virus. In the rest of Asia, several nations continue to suffer the onslaught of the Omicron variant. And in the last few days, countries such as South Korea and Indonesia recorded record numbers of daily cases. Our correspondent, Ramzi Braza, expands on this.
Enforcing strict measures to contain the new Delta and Omicron variants of the new coronavirus, China is also maintaining a steady immunization pace, with an average of 5 to 6 million COVID-19 vaccines being administered in the country every day. The Asian giant, which has already applied more than 3 billion doses of vaccines against COVID-19 in its territory, is advancing at full speed towards the goal of vaccinating its entire population. According to official records, between 5 and 6 million doses vaccines are being administered every day. According to the National Health Commission, more than 1.2 billion people in the country have already received at least 2 jabs and completed the vaccination cycle. The entity also announced that it has already initiated a process of consecutive immunization of COVID-19, a method that consists of administering boosters vaccines based on a different technology than those used in the initial inoculations, with the objective of reinforcing collective immunity against the disease. China, which today reported 144 new cases of COVID-19, 71 of them due to local infection, continues at the moment with strict epidemiological measures, especially in the regions of inland Mongolia and in the southeastern part of the country, where the active focuses of the disease are located. On the other hand, after surpassing 100,000 infections in one day, South Korea reported over 95,000 cases on Monday. To try to contain the spread and not to overload the health system, the authorities are implementing different measures, including providing more self-diagnosis kits and asking patients with mild symptoms to take care of themselves at home. But despite the increase of cases, South Korean authorities announced a light softening of restrictions ahead of the March 9th presidential elections amid growing annoyance from business owners. Meanwhile, Indonesia saw a 74% increase in the cases of infection in the past week. The nation of 278 million people has vaccinated 70.1% of its population with at least 1 dose and is considering lifting all quarantine requirements for incoming travelers in an effort to stimulate tourism and businesses. According to the authorities, they need to find a balance between the need to maintain health and the need to maintain the economy. This is how things are today on this side of the world. We will be back with more news from the Asian continent in the next few days.
Thank you, Ramsey, for this report, and we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.